She provoked it. I warned her.
You targeted a pregnant woman.
She fired before I could shout her name. The crack split the air like lightning hitting steel, and the bullet tore past Ava's arm so close it peeled fabric and skin in the same violent breath. My daughter staggered near the White Willow Bridge, one hand bracing her stomach, her voice catching as blood dotted her sleeve. And there, standing with her feet planted like she owned the entire subdivision, was Marcia Kellerman, arm extended, chest heaving, as if nearly shooting a pregnant woman counted as community service. "Back away," the board chair snapped, her tone dripping with the smug righteousness only tyrants believe in. She ignored posted safety protocols. My pulse slammed in my ears. She was stepping out of her car. "That's speeding," the enforcer in crimson replied coldly, lowering the gun but refusing to look the slightest bit remorseful. Ava leaned into me, and all I saw was red. Not rage, fear sharpened by memory. I'd buried one child already, and the thought of losing another struck me with the same force as the bullet meant to warn her. If you've ever felt that deep electric surge of protection when someone crosses a line they should never cross, stay right here and hit subscribe. Marcia holstered the weapon with a smug flick, as if the show was over. "This community thrives on order," she said, "and your daughter nearly caused an accident." I studied the spent shell glinting in the dust. "You fired a live round, Marcia." Her eyes narrowed. "Mr. Carrington, don't lecture me about threats." That was her mistake. I straightened slowly, letting the air settle just enough before delivering the first cold truth, the one that shifted the ground beneath her expensive heels. "Marcia, I specialize in prosecuting firearm misuse." Her jaw twitched. She didn't know the half of it. People think prosecutors live in courtrooms. They forget we watch, we catalog, we observe. Years of reading lies on witness stands sharpen your instinct for predators who wear professionalism like perfume. And standing in front of me, smug and sweating in the afternoon sun, was a predator who believed she ran this neighborhood like her own private kingdom. But she didn't know who she'd crossed. I wrapped my jacket around Ava's bleeding arm, and she whispered, "Dad, I'm okay." "You're safe," I murmured, even though the tremble in my hand said otherwise. I'd promised myself years ago, after burying my son, that I'd never let danger get this close again. And yet, here we were, beneath the swaying willow branches, the bridge casting shadows over the exact place where Ava had almost lost everything. That's why this wasn't just about a warning shot. It was about a line crossed so violently that stepping back wasn't an option. Neighbors gathered, whispers, turning into a low hum. The clipboard queen edged closer, clutching her binder to her chest like a shield. The officer of rules hovered behind Marcia, pretending to take notes but shaking so badly the pen tapped like a nervous heartbeat. Marcia lifted her chin. "File a complaint if you must. The board will handle it." "That board?" I asked quietly. "The one you control?" Her gaze flickered, a crack, small but there. I guided Ava to the bridge rail, my arm around her shoulders. "Go home," I told her gently. "I'll follow in a minute." She didn't argue. She was brave like that. When she left, I turned back toward the tyrant in heels. She crossed her arms, trying to reclaim authority she'd already lost. "This isn't finished," she said. "No," I answered, "it isn't." And for the first time, she looked uncertain. By the time I walked Ava back to our house, her breathing had steadied, but the tremor in her hands hadn't faded. I sat her on the couch, checked the graze again, and felt that same cold fury pulse through my chest. The cut was shallow, thank God, but it wasn't the wound that kept replaying in my mind. It was the sound, the gunshot echoing off the White Willow Bridge, the image of her freezing, one hand over her stomach, the way Marcia Kellerman had acted like she was issuing a parking citation instead of firing a weapon at a pregnant woman. When Ava finally fell asleep, exhaustion pulling her under, I stepped outside onto the porch. The evening had settled thick and heavy over the neighborhood, but the silence wasn't peaceful. It was watchful. People knew something had happened. They just didn't know how far it went. Across the cul-de-sac, the board chair stood outside her house with her arms crossed, barking orders at the clipboard queen, who scribbled furiously while trying, and failing, to hide how rattled she was. The enforcer in crimson paced behind them, muttering into her phone like she was trying to rewrite the day before anyone else told the story. That's how these people survived. Control the narrative, and you control the community. But not this time. I descended the porch steps just as Trevor Lanning, the HOA treasurer, walked toward me from the sidewalk. He looked shaken, almost sick, like someone replaying a scene over and over in his head. This is the kind of fight you don't just witness, you feel. Where are you watching from? Elias? Can we talk? He asked softly. He didn't meet my eyes at first. He kept running his thumb over the edge of his phone, a nervous habit I recognized instantly. I'd seen jurors do the same thing when they were hiding something they desperately wanted to tell me, but didn't know how. What is it? I asked. He glanced over his shoulder at the tyrant in heels, who was still lecturing the clipboard queen like nothing catastrophic had happened. She's already trying to spin what happened. She's saying your daughter advanced aggressively and forced her to fire a warning shot. My jaw clenched. Aggressively? Ava could barely climb out of the car. Trevor swallowed hard. I know. I saw the whole thing from the walkway. His body language told the rest. The slight shake in his voice, the way he shifted from foot to foot, the fear in his eyes whenever he glanced back at the board chair. He wasn't just nervous. He was trapped between truth and loyalty, between what he'd signed up for and what he'd just witnessed. I lowered my voice. Trevor, you don't owe her anything. He let out a shaky breath. I thought she was strict, controlling, but today she crossed a line. Even she can't hide behind the safety excuse. The law doesn't bend for her, I said. He hesitated, rubbing his face with both hands. Elias, she told the officer of rules to prepare the official narrative. She wants the board minutes adjusted before the emergency meeting tomorrow. Fabrication, obstruction, cover-up. Every word he said weighed heavier. Trevor finally met my gaze. She's dangerous, and if I say anything publicly, she'll go after me next. She already has, I said quietly. You just haven't felt the full force yet. He looked like a man caught in quicksand. You're the only person she fears, he whispered. You have the power to stop her. I exhaled slowly. I have the law. A car door slammed across the way. The clipboard queen nearly jumped out of her skin, while the enforcer in crimson shot me a look that hovered somewhere between hatred and panic. And then Marcia Kellerman herself turned toward me. Her expression was sharp, predatory. She lifted her chin like she knew exactly what Trevor had told me. She raised her voice across the cul-de-sac. Careful, Mr. Carrington. Meddling with official proceedings has consequences. I walked a step closer, my voice steady. So does firing a weapon at a pregnant woman. For a moment, just a moment, the tyrant in heels faltered. Her eyes flickered, her mask thinned. Then she stormed inside her house, slamming the door behind her with a crack almost as sharp as the bullet she'd fired hours earlier. Trevor exhaled shakily. She's panicking. No, I corrected. She's preparing. And so was I. Trevor showed up on my doorstep before sunrise, his silhouette framed in the faint blue haze creeping across the White Willow Bridge. I'd barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ava flinch, saw the bullet spit sparks off the gravel, saw Marcia Kellerman lowering her weapon like she expected applause. But when I opened the door and saw Trevor's face, I knew something in him had cracked overnight. His eyes were bloodshot, his shirt untucked. His hands, always steady during HOA audits, trembled so badly he kept tucking them into his pockets like he could hide the shaking. I couldn't stay in that house, he whispered. Not after last night. Come in, I said. He stepped inside, but he didn't sit. He paced the entryway like he expected the board chair herself to burst through the door and drag him back to her side. Every turn he made, he'd pause, rub the back of his neck, exhale shakily, then start pacing again. Visible internal struggle didn't begin to describe it. Trevor looked like a man whose conscience had finally woken up and was now tearing through the walls he'd built to keep himself safe. I motioned for him to breathe. Tell me what's going on. He stopped pacing long enough to pull out his phone. His fingers hovered over the screen, then pulled back. Hovered again. He swallowed hard. She texted me, he said. All night. The enforcer in crimson, too. The clipboard queen called twice. The officer of rules sent a message with a revised timeline for the shooting. And Marcia, he trailed off, inhaling sharply. She wants me to sign off on the official HOA statement before the emergency meeting. I studied him carefully. What's in the statement? His voice cracked. That your daughter lunged at her, that the warning shot was meant to hit the ground, that the gun malfunctioned, that she acted in imminent danger. Every lie struck like a hammer. But Trevor, he looked like the nail they'd been pounding for years. He paced again, running both hands through his hair. Elias, I can't sign it, but if I don't, she'll say I'm unstable, that I'm dishonest. She'll bury me under violations. She'll ruin my business, my reputation. Trevor, look at me. He forced himself to meet my eyes. You know what you saw, I said. You know what really happened. His throat bobbed. I know. And you also know, I continued, stepping closer, that firing a weapon at a pregnant woman isn't a violation. It's a crime. He flinched. I know. And covering it up? I asked quietly. That's federal. He froze mid-breath. Yeah. The truth hit him like a cold wind through a cracked window. I didn't sign up for this. His voice broke. I wanted to help my neighborhood. I didn't want to be part of whatever she's becoming. I placed a steady hand on his shoulder. Trevor, you're not part of it. Not anymore. You're the witness, the one who can stop this from getting worse. He shut his eyes tightly, shoulders trembling. She threatened me, Elias, last night. She said anyone who interferes is an enemy of the community. A surge of anger rose in my chest. That was exactly the type of language the tyrant in heels used when she felt her power slipping. Trevor opened his eyes, breathing hard. I don't want to be scared of her, but I am. You're standing here, I said softly. That says more than you think. He looked out the window toward the bridge. What do I do? You tell the truth, I said. Tonight, at the meeting. He swallowed again, the motion shaky. She'll retaliate. She already has, I replied. Now let the law handle her. Before he could answer, a car rolled slowly past my house. A sleek black SUV, tinted windows. Trevor's face drained of color. That's her car! We both watched as the enforcer in crimson leaned out the passenger side window, surveying my property like she was marking landmarks for a future battle. Trevor stepped back, voice trembling. She's watching us. I locked eyes with him. Good. Let her. Because after last night, the next move didn't belong to her anymore. The SUV didn't leave right away. It idled at the curb long enough for the early morning sun to glint across the windshield, making it impossible to see who else sat inside. But I didn't need to see. I recognized the tension, the arrogance, the calculated pause. That was Marcia Kellerman's signature. Intimidation through stillness, pressure applied like a hand tightening slowly around a throat. When the vehicle finally pulled away, Trevor sagged against the doorframe. I could tell he was already regretting coming to my house. Not because he didn't want to help, because he knew what it would unleash. We need neutral ground, I said, somewhere her reach feels smaller. Trevor nodded shakily, and we walked toward the neighborhood's community garden, a quiet, sunlit place normally used for weekend planting events and HOA-approved potlucks. Today it felt like a confessional booth. Residents milled around, pulling weeds and watering herbs, but their eyes flicked to us with curiosity. They'd all heard something. Word traveled fast when gunfire was involved, and even faster when it came from the tyrant in heels. We sat on the low stone wall near the marigold planters. Trevor's leg bounced in a rapid, nervous rhythm. She's escalating, he whispered. She spent half the night tearing into the officer of rules because he didn't react fast enough yesterday. The clipboard queen told me she made them rewrite the violation report 3 times. Fabrication, coercion, intimidation. The whole board was drowning. I kept my voice calm. And you? Trevor stared down at his hands. I'm supposed to present the revised safety protocol at tonight's meeting. It includes measures to justify her shot. His voice cracked. They want to claim Ava rushed out of the vehicle aggressively. A surge of heat crawled up my spine. Ava nearly fainted. She could barely stand. I know that, he whispered miserably. And so does she. The enforcer in crimson appeared at the garden gate. She scanned the rows of flowers, spotted us, and froze. Her posture stiffened, back straight, chin up. But even from across the garden, I saw the flicker of something she usually kept buried. Fear. She lifted her phone, snapped a picture. Not of me, of Trevor. He flinched, violently. "That's a message," he muttered. "She's telling me she's watching." The enforcer turned and hurried away before any resident could approach her. Trevor's breath hitched. "They're going to destroy me." "No," I said firmly. "They're going to expose themselves." A cluster of neighbors approached us then, Kimber Wade among them. She carried a binder filled with notes and printed screenshots. Her face was pale but determined. "I've been documenting HOA abuses for months," she said quietly. Marcia's bullying, the board chair targeting elderly residents, the clipboard queen forging timestamps, every pattern, every manipulation. Trevor stared at her like she'd handed him oxygen. Kimber leaned closer. "I never had anyone to bring this to, no one who'd actually do something." "You do now," I said. Trevor's hands trembled again, but this time with the sense that maybe, just maybe, standing up wasn't suicide. Kimber glanced toward the sidewalk. "Be careful. She's furious today. The tyrant in heels called a closed-door prep session at noon. Board members only." My jaw tightened. "Let her prepare." Another neighbor leaned in. "Everyone's talking about what happened to your daughter. The story's spreading. Fast." Good. Fear spread quickly in Maple Crest. But truth moved faster. A notification pinged on Trevor's phone. He read it and went white. "She wants me at that closed-door meeting. She says attendance is mandatory." Mandatory. Threat disguised as procedure. "She knows you came to me," I said. Trevor swallowed hard. "What do I do?" "You go," I answered. "And you listen. Don't confront her. Don't challenge her. Just observe. And if she asks where I was this morning," he whispered, "tell her nothing," I said. "Silence will scare her more than any answer." He nodded slowly, then stood on unsteady legs. As he walked away, Kimber spoke softly beside me. "She won't go down quietly." "No," I murmured, "but she will go down. And tonight's meeting? That would be the first crack in her fortress." Trevor didn't text for nearly 2 hours. Every minute of silence prickled under my skin like a warning hum. By the time my phone finally buzzed, I was standing inside Maple Crest's small recreation center, pretending to review event forms, while keeping an eye on the hallway that led to the HOA boardroom. "She's furious. Meeting starting now. Don't call." That was all he sent. I slipped the phone into my pocket and moved toward the bulletin board. It gave me a direct angle on the frosted glass window of the boardroom door, just enough to sense movement, shadows, and posture, nothing more. But posture can tell you everything. Inside, Marcia Kellerman paced like a general preparing for war. Even blurred through frosted glass, her silhouette was unmistakable. The stiff shoulders, the rigid chin, the cadence of someone who believed fear was currency and she was rich beyond measure. The clipboard queen stood beside her, rifling through a stack of papers with frantic energy. The officer of rules hovered near the table, like he wished the ground would swallow him whole. The enforcer in crimson was missing, likely patrolling outside into paranoid circles. Trevor appeared last. His shadow hesitated at the doorway before he stepped inside. Good. That hesitation told me everything. He still had a conscience, and he still believed there was something worth protecting. My phone buzzed again. They're rewriting the narrative. She wants to claim Ava charged the vehicle. She says the shot was a reasonable protective action. My blood ran cold. And then another message came instantly after. She's pushing to file an official misconduct complaint against me if I don't support the revised statement. There it was. The pressure, the chokehold, the ultimatum. Classic tyrant and heels strategy. Crush dissent early so no one else dares to speak. Through the blurred glass, Marcia's silhouette jerked sharply. She slapped her palm on the table. Even from the hallway, I heard the muffled thud. The board chair had entered her fury phase. I stepped away before someone noticed me and crossed into the secondary office where the community event coordinator kept her work desk. She wasn't in today. Her schedule was taped to the wall. That privacy gave me the breathing room I needed. I opened my laptop. If the HOA wanted to play narratives, I'd counter with law. If they wanted to fabricate stories, I'd counter with facts. And thanks to my career, I knew exactly where to look. Public records. Every HOA incorporated under county guidelines had annual filings, procedural transparency requirements, and compliance reports. And if they failed, intentionally or through corruption, the consequences weren't minor. They were nuclear. I typed the board's incorporation number into the county's digital portal. Nothing came up. Nothing. Strange. I retyped it. Still nothing. Then I tried the subdivision name itself. One file appeared, but it wasn't what it should have been. It was a dissolution notice from 9 months ago. My chest tightened. 9 months ago. Meaning the entity known as Maple Crest Community Standards Authority legally no longer existed. Marcia Kellerman wasn't a board chair. The clipboard queen wasn't a secretary. The officer of rules wasn't a compliance official. They had no standing, no lawful authority, no power to enforce anything. Not fines, not citations, not safety protocols, not firearm reports. Everything they'd done in the last 9 months was a tower built on sand. That was the discovery, the turning point, the leverage. But I needed confirmation. Ironclad. So I called the county clerk's office. The receptionist picked up. Records Division. Yes, I said calmly. I'm inquiring about Maple Crest's HOA, incorporation status. A few clicks, a long pause, then the woman returned. That entity dissolved and never refiled, she said. They aren't legally recognized, haven't been since last year. I closed my eyes, controlled my breathing. This was it. Behind me, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Voices, sharp, frantic, poured out as the boardroom door burst open. Through the gap, I saw fury twisting across Marcia's face as she shoved paperwork at Trevor. My phone buzzed. She wants me to sign the false report. I'm stalling. Not anymore. I typed one reply. Don't sign. I have something bigger. And for the first time since the warning shot grazed my daughter, I felt the tide turn. Tonight, everything would shift. The sun was dipping behind the oaks when I left the recreation center, my laptop bag tight against my side and my pulse hammering with the weight of what I'd uncovered. The dissolution notice felt nuclear in my pocket, clean, factual, undeniable, but information alone wasn't enough. Not when Marcia Kellerman was spiraling into a frenzy, desperate to rewrite the world to fit her fiction. As I crossed the parking lot, I spotted her, the board chair, standing by her SUV like she was patrolling her empire. The enforcer in crimson hovered beside her, arms folded, jaw locked. They both turned at the same time, their glares slicing through the evening like glass. "You!" Marcia barked, stepping forward. "Where were you snooping today?" Her voice carried across the asphalt, sharp, accusing, hungry for a fight. The clipboard queen trailed behind her, clutching a stack of papers she clearly didn't understand. I didn't stop walking, didn't flinch. "Looking for answers you've been hiding," I said, unlocking my car. That single sentence made her stiffen like she'd been struck. Good. She should worry. "Don't get clever with me," she snapped. "Your family's been racking up violations for months, and after today's incident, you should be grateful we haven't filed a full community safety claim against your daughter." My jaw tightened. "Your bullet grazed a pregnant woman." Her lips twitched, irritation, not guilt. The tyrant in heels hated the reminder. "We're filing our report," she said. "Our version. And if your little brother, the state trooper, thinks he can intimidate this board, he'll find out how wrong he is." The officer of rules approached slowly from behind her, eyes down, posture shrinking. Trevor's absence in this little parade of power said everything. They didn't trust him anymore. Good. He didn't trust them either. I slid into my seat without another word. The less they sensed my leverage, the better. But as I drove home, the tremors of everything I'd learned rippled and expanded until they formed one undeniable conclusion. It was time to act. At my house, porch lights glowed softly through the dusk. Inside, Ava rested on the couch. A blanket, pulled over her legs, one hand on her belly. Her breathing was steady, but her eyes carried the exhaustion of someone who had stared death in the face. "Dad," she whispered when she saw me. I knelt beside her. "You're safe," I said quietly. "And I promise you, they'll never get near you again." She nodded once, jaw trembling. My daughter wasn't fragile, but she was pregnant, and being shot at, even indirectly, leaves a wound no bandage can fix. I moved to my office, closed the door, and powered on the second laptop, the one I used for case structuring. Files, templates, legal frameworks, all of it designed for one purpose: assembling airtight arguments. Tonight, I wasn't acting as a father. I wasn't acting as a neighbor. Tonight, I was acting as a federal prosecutor. I pulled up the dissolution notice and began cross-referencing their last valid election, their failed refiling, their unauthorized enforcement actions, their fraudulent fines, their misuse of community funds, their unregistered firearm incident. Every unchecked box, every missed requirement, every false claim formed another piece of the trap I was building, and it had to be perfect. Because people like Marcia Kellerman didn't crumble under pressure, they doubled down. The only way to bring down a tyrant in heels was to leave them no escape. As the hours stretched, my desk transformed into a wall of evidence. The officer of rules' signature on an invalid warning, the clipboard queen's inconsistent dates, the enforcer in Crimson's patrol logs, and the board chair's aggressive statements recorded from the incident. I paused only when I heard faint tapping, someone approaching. Trevor stood in the doorway, swallowing hard. "She's losing it," he whispered, "and she thinks you're planning something. I didn't tell her anything, but she's scared." "Good," I said. He blinked, startled. "Trevor," I continued, leaning forward, "I know the truth about the HOA." His breath caught. "You don't have to choose tonight," I told him, "but soon you will." He nodded slowly, then slipped back into the night. By the time the clock struck midnight, I had made my decision. Tomorrow, Marcia Kellerman would face the one thing she couldn't intimidate, manipulate, or shout down: the law. Morning light spilled across the kitchen table, illuminating the stacks of evidence I'd organized the night before. The dissolution notice sat in the center like a loaded weapon, quiet, unassuming, but powerful enough to rip the foundation out from under Marcia Kellerman and her collapsing empire of fear. I was sipping lukewarm coffee when a soft knock rattled the front door. Too soft to be the enforcer in Crimson, too hesitant to be the clipboard queen, too uncertain to belong to the tyrant in heels. I opened the door. Trevor stood there, eyes red, shoulders hunched, fingers fidgeting with the corner of his badge, lanyard. The officer of rules looked less like an enforcer and more like a man drowning in something he couldn't name. "We need to talk," he murmured, voice cracking around the edges. I stepped aside, letting him in. He hovered near the entryway like he expected Marcia's shadow to stretch in behind him and drag him back to heel. "She's lost control," he said quietly. "Completely." I raised an eyebrow. "She lost control when she fired a shot at a pregnant woman." He flinched, not out of guilt, but out of recognition. Of truth. "I know," he whispered. "And that's part of why I'm here." I waited. Silence made people reveal more than interrogation ever could. Trevor swallowed, then lowered his voice. "She's covering up more than you think. The board chair has been operating without authority for nearly a year. Elections never happened. The last treasurer quit months ago. And the enforcer in Crimson, she's not authorized for community security at all." My breath stilled. This was it, the moment the conflicted witness stepped off the ledge. "Why tell me?" I asked. His eyes flicked to my daughter's baby shoes on the hallway shelf. "Because she almost killed your kid," he said, "and because she'd do it again to stay in power." He pulled a folded sheet from his jacket and placed it on the table. Not a garage document, not a basement relic. A current internal memo. Unauthorized enforcement expansion, signatures missing, funds redirected, protocols ignored. The clipboard queen's sloppy handwriting was visible even upside down. I dragged a hand across my jaw. "You realize what giving me this means?" Trevor nodded, fear surfacing like a tremor. "I'm already out. She suspects I'm talking. The tyrant in heels told the board last night she'd handle anyone who wasn't loyal." "And you think she meant you?" I said. "I know she did." I studied him, sleepless, shame-packed, but brave enough to cross a line no one else had dared. "Trevor," I said slowly, "once this starts, it won't stop. She'll come after everyone connected to the truth." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Then do it fast." I exhaled, hard. The dissolution notice wasn't just leverage now, it was a lifeline, a shield, a detonator. Sit, I told him. We're doing this right. He sat across from me, fingers tapping nervously on the table. I pulled the HOA bylaws onto the laptop screen. This, I said, pointing, is where she's exposed. Her authority evaporates once we prove the election was invalid. Trevor leaned closer. That's not all. There's something else. His throat bobbed. The night she fired that warning shot, she didn't file the incident report. I blinked. Excuse me? She told the enforcer in crimson to say it was a drop tool, a noise, anything but a firearm. My pulse sharpened. That's criminal. Trevor nodded. No, and I recorded her saying it. For a moment, the room felt weightless. Then everything crashed into place. Play it, I said. He hit a button on his phone. Static. Then Marcia's voice. Cold, clipped, calculating. No report, no weapon. If anyone asks, it was a malfunctioning generator. If this gets out, I'm done, and so are all of you. When the clip ended, Trevor's hands trembled. I stood. You just ended her career. No, he said, voice shaking. You will. I looked at the evidence spread before us. Legal violations, financial misconduct, election fraud, and now obstruction of a firearm incident. The tyrant in heels wasn't just vulnerable. She was finished. And thanks to Trevor's confession, the next phase of the plan could finally begin. Trevor's recording was still echoing in my head long after he left. The way Marcia Kellerman delivered those words, sharp, icy, fully convinced she was untouchable, ignited something in me I hadn't felt since my early days in federal prosecution. Righteous fury mixed with precision. A fire that didn't burn out. It refined. I gathered everything across the table, the illegal enforcement memo, the fraudulent governance gaps, the dissolution notice, and now the recording that tied the board chair directly to obstruction. Each piece was a brick. Together, they were a wall she couldn't climb over, and a trap she couldn't crawl out of. But this phase needed more than evidence. It needed strategy. I grabbed my laptop and drove to the one place in Briarstone Cove where the HOA couldn't see me. The quiet corner booth at Harlow's Coffee House, tucked behind a row of potted ferns and shielded from the windows. It had been my thinking spot long before the clipboard queen declared it an unauthorized congregation space. As I settled into the booth, the weight of what I was about to initiate pressed against my ribs. Dissolving an HOA wasn't a simple administrative issue. It was a bomb dropped right in the middle of a community's stability. But the tyrant in heels had already turned the neighborhood into something unstable, something dangerous, something that put lives at risk. My phone buzzed with a message from my daughter. Dad, she hasn't shown her face today. Mom thinks she's planning something. A chill threaded down my spine. I opened the laptop and pulled up the dissolution statutes, cross-referencing them with the evidence Trevor provided. Every line I read widened the cracks under the officer of rules' authority. Every statute connected back to the same conclusion. Once I presented the case to the state's Community Governance Commission, Marcia's control would collapse within days. She'd thought firing a warning shot would scare us into silence. Instead, it pushed me into motion. I typed a draft of the petition, weaving every violation together: unauthorized security hires, fraudulent elections, concealed firearm discharge, and governance misconduct. This wasn't a complaint. It was a structural indictment. Halfway through typing, a familiar voice cut through the cafe's soft hum. You're playing with fire. I looked up. It was Dr. Naomi Lark, the community's pediatrician and the quiet observer, who had watched Marcia's empire rot from the inside. She slid into the seat across from me without asking, eyes narrowing at the laptop. She knows someone's feeding you information, Naomi whispered, and the enforcer in crimson is walking around like she's ready to tear the neighborhood in half. They won't get the chance, I said. Naomi folded her hands. You're building something big, I can see that. But you need to remember, people here are afraid of her. Some won't stand with you. I nodded. They won't have to stand with me. They just need the truth to land where it matters. Her gaze drifted to the screen. If the tyrant in heels falls, the whole board will follow. That's the goal, she hesitated. Then you should add this. She slid her phone across the table. A video. I tapped play. There she was, Marcia, standing beside the clipboard queen at last month's budget meeting, telling residents that all financials were secure, balanced, and fully audited. But behind her, Naomi had angled her camera just enough to capture the projector screen. Account balances mismatched, missing invoices, and an unexplained transfer marked Board Administrative Privilege. "I knew something was wrong," Naomi said. "You need this." My pulse quickened. This seals the financial misconduct angle and shows intent," she added. I leaned back, the pieces locking into place like tumblers in a safe. "We have her on governance fraud, misuse of authority, firearm obstruction, and now financial deception. And you," she said quietly, "have the one skill she never expected: federal-level prosecutorial precision." I closed the laptop slowly. "This isn't just a strategy anymore," I said. "It's a takedown." Outside, the wind shifted. Clouds thickened above Briarstone Cove, as if the neighborhood itself sensed the storm that was coming, and I was ready to bring it. The wind picked up by the time I left Harlow's coffee house, sweeping leaves across the pavement in frantic circles. It felt like the whole neighborhood was bracing, like Briarstone Cove itself knew what was coming for Marcia Kellerman. The board chair had ruled with arrogance for too long, but today, the ground beneath her empire began to splinter. I drove straight to my home office, shut the door, and laid everything out on the desk. Naomi's video, Trevor's recording, the fraudulent memo, the misuse of funds clip, the dissolution statutes, evidence that would have taken a team months to gather, now stacked in front of me like a case file built for federal indictment. The tyrant in heels had no idea the walls were caving in. I opened my laptop and began building the submission packet for the state commission. Every page had to be airtight, every citation exact, every timestamp cross-matched. I wasn't just preparing a complaint. I was crafting an administrative strike that would take her entire governing structure down in one blow. But preparation wasn't just documents. It was positioning. I texted Naomi and Trevor separately, setting up staggered times for sworn statements. Both agreed instantly. Fear had shaped them for months, but something about the officer of rules firing a warning shot at a pregnant woman snapped whatever loyalty they had left. While drafting the statements, a sharp thud hit my front window. My heart kicked. I stood and stepped to the glass. Across the street, the enforcer in crimson stood beside Marcia's SUV, arms crossed, eyes locked on my house. Her stare wasn't the usual HOA arrogance. It was feral, jittery, cornered. She pulled out her phone, muttered something, then got in the vehicle and sped off. They knew. Not what I was planning, just that something was shifting beyond their control. Time was running short. I returned to the desk and continued assembling the packet, using prosecutor-level precision, not a word out of place, not a detail left floating. I even added the budget discrepancies Naomi captured, aligning them with the HOA's required quarterly disclosure. Halfway through organizing, my wife entered quietly, one hand on her pregnant belly. "Everything okay?" she asked, voice steady but eyes heavy. I took her hand gently. "It will be." She looked at the documents. "She's not going to stop until someone stops her. Exactly why I need to finish this today." Her fingers tightened around mine. "Just be careful." The clipboard queen was circling the block earlier. She looked angry. That didn't surprise me. The clipboard queen always looked angry, but today there was fear behind it. Fear made dangerous people unpredictable. I returned to my work once she stepped out. Next up, preparing photographic evidence. I loaded photos of the bullet groove on the car door, matching them with the officer's firearm caliber. I included the police report, marked incomplete because the HOA never disclosed the incident. Then I embedded Trevor's time-stamped memo showing the cover-up directive. Every piece formed a chain, every link leading back to Marcia Kellerman. The officer of rules had built her authority on fear, but fear made her sloppy, and sloppy officials leave trails. Once the packet was nearly complete, I moved to the next step, securing witness protection through official channels. Not the federal kind, yet, but the local administrative protections for residents giving testimony against community boards. Trevor would need it. Naomi might too. As I filled out the forms, headlights rolled slowly past my home. I froze. It was her, the tyrant in heels herself, sitting in the driver's seat, staring directly at my house like she was studying the structure for faults, like she was waiting for it to crack. The SUV idled, engine humming like a threat unspoken. Then she drove off without hesitation. A shiver ran along my spine. This wasn't a woman preparing for a board meeting. This was a woman preparing for war. I returned to the desk and printed the final draft of the dissolution packet. I reviewed everything twice, then assembled it into a neat, devastating stack. Tomorrow, I would submit it. Tonight, I fortified. Every door locked, every camera synced, every backup filed, because the next move wouldn't be mine. It would be hers, and I needed to be ready when she made it. Dawn crawled over Briarstone Cove like a dim warning, casting long shadows across the street as I walked toward the community center with the dissolution packet tucked under my arm. Today wasn't the confrontation. That would come soon. But this was the moment the board chair's empire officially began to collapse. The filing with the state commission had gone through electronically at 6:12 a.m. sharp. What I carried now were the resident notifications and supporting exhibits required to trigger the mandatory review. The tyrant in heels wouldn't see it coming until it was too late. The community center door creaked as I pushed it open. Inside, early risers were scattered around, some grabbing coffee, some chatting softly, some pretending they weren't terrified of Marcia Kellerman. They felt the shift in the air too. Fear had kept them obedient for months. Today, fear finally had a challenger. I walked to the front desk where Lila, the only administrator Marcia hadn't managed to intimidate, looked up and blinked. "Are you filing something?" "Yes," I said, handing her the set. "And it needs to be time-stamped, copied, and distributed to the residential notice board immediately." She froze when she saw the header. "Dissolution petition? Backed by statutes, evidence, and sworn statements." Her eyes widened. "She's going to lose her mind." "She already has," I said quietly. As she carried the packet to the scanner, I turned and caught sight of someone standing halfway down the hall. Someone who shouldn't have been there, the enforcer in crimson. She leaned against the wall like a viper biding her moment, arms folded, expression carved out of stone. Her gaze tracked every move I made, like she was memorizing my breathing pattern. "You're early," she said, voice cold. I didn't break stride, just needed to get something filed. "The clipboard queen will want to see it. I'm sure she will." Her eyes narrowed. "You're making things harder than they need to be. Hard situations don't scare me." Her jaw tightened, not from anger, but from something deeper. Fear. She stepped aside, watching me like a threat she didn't know how to neutralize. I left the building and headed straight to the next phase of my preparation, the resident petition signatures. Even though dissolution didn't require a vote, resident impact statements strengthened the case, and legally, they forced immediate oversight review. I visited each house, one by one, gathering signatures from people who had been victims of the Officer of Rules abuse. Unauthorized fines, stalking patrols, threats of property seizure. Every name added a crack to Marcia's foundation. By the time I returned home, the sun was high, and my phone buzzed nonstop with messages. Some supportive, some frightened, some whispering that the tyrant in heels had been storming around Briarstone Cove, demanding to know where I was. She wouldn't have to search long. Because when I entered the driveway, her SUV was already parked in front of my house. She stood beside it, arms rigid at her sides, breathing fast, fury simmering beneath her skin. The clipboard queen was with her, clutching a binder like it could shield her. And behind them, the enforcer in crimson paced like she expected a fight. I stepped out of the car slowly, knowing this wasn't the confrontation yet, but close enough to taste. Marcia stalked toward me, heels stabbing the pavement. "You think you can undo my authority with paperwork?" "Not paperwork," I said calmly. "Proof." The board chair's expression twitched. "People like you ruin communities. People like you endanger them." Her shoulders stiffened. "You're going to regret this." "No," I said. "You are." Behind her, the clipboard queen swallowed hard. Something in her posture, the same unease Trevor had shown, told me she wasn't fully aligned anymore. Cracks were spreading through their side, too. Marcia pointed at me with a trembling, furious finger. "This isn't over." "You're right," I said, walking past her. "It's just starting." The enforcer in crimson stepped forward like she wanted to block me, but Marcia snapped, "Let him go." She knew she couldn't touch me now. Not with the petition filed, not with the evidence secured, not with the legal shield around every move I made. As I reached my door, my phone buzzed again. A message from the State Commission. Petition received. Preliminary review accelerated due to public safety concerns. I exhaled slowly. The tipping point had arrived, and nothing the tyrant in heels did next could stop what was already in motion. The Briarstone Cove Community Hall hadn't been this packed in years. Cars lined the street, conversations buzzed like static, and tension sat thick in the air, heavy enough to taste. Word had spread fast. The State Commission issued an emergency directive to review the petition publicly. No behind-closed-doors meeting, no quiet dismissal. This confrontation would unfold in front of every resident Marcia Kellerman had intimidated for years. The board chair strutted into the hall like a general marching into battle, chin raised, eyes blazing. The tyrant in heels wore a crimson suit today, a sharp, almost violent shade, as if she dressed specifically to dominate the room. The clipboard queen trailed behind her, knuckles white around her binder. And the enforcer in crimson scanned the crowd with a simmering unease, jaw twitching every few seconds. But, for the first time since moving here, they weren't the ones people stepped back from. I was. Not out of fear, out of expectation. I walked toward the front row where Trevor and Naomi were seated. Trevor pale but steady, Naomi calm but razor-focused. Both knew what today meant. The officer of rules locked eyes with me across the hall. Her expression flickered, a crack in the facade. She knew she wasn't walking out of this with her authority intact. The commissioner entered next, a middle-aged man in a slate suit, carrying a stack of documents I recognized instantly. My packet, my exhibits, my evidence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice carrying through the hall, "we are here today to review serious allegations regarding the governance and conduct of the Briarstone Cove Homeowners Association." A ripple went through the crowd. Marcia stepped forward, smile stretched thin. "Commissioner, these claims are exaggerated attempts to undermine legitimate HOA structure." The commissioner lifted a hand, cutting her off. "Ms. Kellerman, you will have your opportunity to respond after we present the findings." Her smile faltered. He opened the packet. First, governance violations. The board chair has failed to conduct elections for 2 consecutive cycles, in direct violation of the Briarstone Charter. The clipboard queen stiffened. Residents muttered. Second, unauthorized expenditures and missing financial audits. Gasps. Someone in the back whispered, "I knew it." Third, misuse of authority, including the unsanctioned hiring of an enforcement officer. The enforcer in crimson shifted uncomfortably, eyes narrowing at Marcia. And fourth, the commissioner's tone darkened. Obstruction of a firearm discharge incident involving a resident and their pregnant daughter. The hall erupted, shouts, cries, outrage. Marcia slammed her palm against the table. "Lies! All of it!" The commissioner didn't flinch. "We have video evidence contradicting your statements." Naomi rose and walked to the stand, phone in hand. When the video played, the financial inconsistencies glowing on the projector, residents turned on the board chair with disbelief and fury. The tyrant in heels attempted to mask her panic with indignation, but the room no longer bent to her. Then Trevor stood. His voice trembled, but his words carried like a hammer. "I was present the night she fired that shot. She ordered us to conceal it. I recorded her giving the directive." He handed over his phone. The audio played. Marcia's voice filled the room. "No report, no weapon. If this gets, out, I'm done. And so are all of you." Chaos broke loose. People stood out of their seats yelling, demanding she step down, demanding police intervention. The clipboard queen covered her mouth. The enforcer in crimson stared at the floor like she wished she could disappear. The commissioner banged a gavel. "Order." The room quieted into a suffocating silence. "Ms. Kellerman," he said clearly, "effective immediately, you are suspended from HOA leadership pending full dissolution review. You are also referred to the district attorney for criminal investigation." Her face drained of color. She spun toward me, voice shaking with rage. "You did this." "No," I said evenly. "You did." Residents began to cheer, quiet at first, then swelling like a rising tide. For the first time since moving into Briarstone Cove, I saw fear. Not in the neighbors, but in the tyrant in heels who had ruled them. Tonight, her reign ended, and tomorrow, the community would rise without her. The community hall emptied slowly, leaving behind echoes of arguments, relief, and long overdue justice. I stood near the doorway, watching residents gather in small circles, processing, replaying, finally breathing. After the commissioner's ruling, Marcia Kellerman had been escorted out by 2 officers sent by the county. She didn't fight, she didn't shout. The tyrant in heels walked stiffly, almost hollow, like the weight of her own actions had finally crushed the persona she'd built. For the first time, the enforcer in crimson wasn't shadowing her. She stood alone in the corner, hands clasped tight, head bowed like she was waiting for judgment that hadn't arrived yet. The clipboard queen lingered beside a pillar, staring at her binder as if the pages inside were written in a language she no longer recognized. Everything they believed about their authority had collapsed in a single afternoon. The officer of rules had become the woman exposed. I stepped outside into the cool air. Naomi caught up with me, her expression softer than it had been in weeks. "It's done," she said quietly. "Almost," I answered. She gave a knowing nod. "You still have the commission of follow-up, the DA interview." "I'll handle it," I said, "but Briarstone Cove finally has a chance to be a neighborhood again." As she walked off, Trevor approached, eyes still raw, posture tense but no longer defeated. "I thought she'd destroy me," he admitted, but watching her fall, it felt like a weight lifted. "You did the right thing," I told him. He swallowed. "I didn't do it for me. I did it because your daughter didn't deserve what happened." Emotion tightened my chest. "Thank you," I said simply. Trevor nodded, turned, and slipped away into the night. No longer the conflicted witness, but a man rebuilding himself, one step at a time. I headed home slowly, absorbing every detail of the quiet streets, porch lights glowing. Steadily, neighbors walking freely, parents pulling in driveways without fear of being fined for trivial infractions. The symbolic spot, the oak line bend where Marcia fired the shot that grazed my pregnant daughter, felt different now. Not haunted, not threatening, just a place again. My wife waited on the front steps, one hand resting on her belly. When I reached her, she exhaled shakily. "It's over?" "Her reign is," I said, "but the case will move forward. The DA's already reviewing everything." She lowered her head. "She could have killed our daughter." "I know," I whispered, pulling her close. "And she'll answer for it." Inside, I hung my jacket, placed the filing copies in a secure drawer, and finally let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. Fear, anger, determination, relief. My daughter came in quietly, eyes searching mine. "Dad, is she gone?" "Yes," I said. "She won't be hurting anyone else." She hugged me tightly, and for the first time in days, I felt something loosen inside me. Later, I stepped out onto the back porch. The evening breeze rustled through the trees. Briarstone Cove, the place we moved to for peace, was finally inching toward the version we'd hoped for. The neighbors who had once been too scared to speak now stood together. The residents who'd felt powerless now had a voice again. Marcia Kellerman, the board chair who once believed she was untouchable, was no longer in power. The enforcer in crimson and the clipboard queen would face their roles in the misconduct investigation. And the tyrant in heels would now face consequences not as an HOA authority, but as a defendant. Justice wasn't loud. It was steady, measured, irrefutable. I looked toward the camera on my porch, aware my viewers had followed every step of this nightmare alongside me. "If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny," I said, voice steady, "hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from." Tonight, Briarstone Cove took its first breath of freedom, and tomorrow, we rebuild.